All right, hi everybody. So in this video, we're going to review some programming constructs. We're going to do it in the context of the C programming language, which I expect is new to you. What you'll find is having a little bit of programming experience previously, that seeing some of these examples and seeing some of these basic concepts in the context of C is exceptionally similar, in some cases downright identical to what you've seen in possibly other languages depending on your previous experience. Okay, and I want to reiterate the term I have used in a previous video referred to as syntax. Okay, syntax, and this is the rules or the grammar of the language that it must be followed to be understood. Okay, so it's analogous to grammar. If you think of we have certain conventions that we're using, say when we're speaking English, that makes it so that we can understand each other, that our meaning is conveyed in a way that makes sense. And it's quite similar in the context of syntax being the grammar of a particular programming language. If we don't follow proper syntax, the compiler does not understand what we're trying to do. And so in programming languages, we have to be exceptionally precise. We don't have the ability for the computer to kind of try to parse out the meaning of what we're getting at, right? We have to be very, very precise and very explicit so that the compiler can effectively translate our logic into something that the computer's processor can understand. Okay, so we're going to get an understanding of the syntax, right, for the C language, and these are very similar across a wide range of programming languages. So if you pick up one language, you tend to be able to kind of apply it fairly easily towards another. Now, I want to start this off. So let's take a look at the syntax for declaring and initializing a variable in C. All right, the first thing I want to point out with this is that we take a look at this line here for declaring a variable. And in particular, if we look at this statement right here, okay, if we take a look at that, that's declaring a data type, particularly declaring an integer data type. We'll talk a lot more about data types later on, but effectively this is allowing integer values, so say -5, 0, +5, +12, you know, anything that does not have any sort of decimal value, anything after the decimal point. Okay, so we're saying anything like that is a legally defined variable. And we really need two things when declaring a variable. We need we need the data type. Okay, so we need to define the data type. Okay, and then the second piece of information is we need to give it a name, right? What is the variable name we want to give it? In this case, we're just saying I. Okay, so we need those two pieces of information for declaring a variable. What effectively that does is it says somewhere in our computer's memory we have something called I, right? And it's going to be able to store some information, and the information it's going to be able to store is of type integer. Okay, of type integer. Now, when we look at a different line here, when we say, hey, this I equals 5, effectively we're saying that that variable has value 5. Okay, has value 5. Now, we can do this in one line. We look at the bottom here. We can declare and initialize a variable in one line. Right, so the two lines above are equivalent to this one line below. And what I want to get at here is typically, because I've seen this in prior courses as being a common mistake, is we really want to, whenever you declare a variable, okay, you want to initialize it. You want to initialize it because effectively, think about, if we kind of come back to this slide here, think about what happens if we just say int I, right? If we just say int I, we're in a scenario here where the value, right, the value of I is unknown, It's not necessarily 0, okay? It's a key point, not necessarily 0. You can have, that's effectively some location in your computer's memory where that variable I is stored, and you can have some sort of junk sitting in there, okay? You don't want to assume that that value is anything in particular. You don't want to assume it's 0 or any other value. You want to set that value. You want to initialize it with some sort of value. Okay. All right. Particularly before you use it, and it usually makes sense to do it right away. One other thing I want to show you. Actually, let me show you that common mistake first. All right. We take a look at this here. Okay. We take a look at that first line there. We say, hey, I. We got value I. variable I. Okay, it's got store something. We don't know what's being stored in there because we didn't initialize it. We don't know what the value is, right? Then we have variable x, right? And we're saying that starts as value 10, right? And then we're saying x equals I plus x, right? Now, what that does, and this is why I'm saying this is a common mistake, is if we say, well, what value does x have after this line here? What is the value of x, right? We're adding I plus x and we're writing it to x, right? Well, what is the value of x, right? I plus x, and then we're setting x equal to that. So we're going to overwrite 10 here to be something else. What we're effectively saying is the value that gets written here is 10 plus something we don't know, okay? Now, I see people doing this on a pretty regular basis in this class. All right, so I wanted to point it out right away. This is a mistake, right? Because you don't know if I is going to be 0 or not. It could be something else, okay? And the way to avoid that mistake is initialize this to something that you want it to be, say 5 or whatever it is, right? This way it's not ambiguous, right? So if we said I was 5, then it would be 10 plus 5, so x would get the value here of 15, okay? Right, so don't forget to initialize your variables. You can't just declare them. The initialization is important. Okay. Now, one other thing I want to show you before we go into tracing branch statements, okay, is how we can print out an integer value to the screen. All right, so here we're declaring and initializing I here, saying we have an integer I and we're setting it equal to 5, and we want to print to the console, we want to print to the screen, variable I equals 5. Okay? The way that we do that, and again, I'm just kind of introducing these at a high level now, we're going to go deeper into these later on. We're going to use this %d, okay, that stands for that we are printing a integer, okay, we're printing an integer as a decimal. When I say decimal, I mean base 10, right? Where if you think of binary is base 2, base 10, right? 0 through 9, right? Are the digits we're allowed to use. And we're going to print that integer here, right? So we're going to take the value of I and we're going to replace whatever that %d is. Okay? That %d is something called a format specifier. It specifies how we want to print the data, how we want to print the value. We'll look deeper at it later on. Right, but for now, I just want you to kind of have seen that, right, of just how we're going to be able to print an integer. This will print, say, variable I equals 5 with a new line character because we have that /n at the end, okay? And I just want you to kind of see that, right, and we'll build so we kind of have a bit of a foundation to build upon at a later point.